Hi, good morning. Thanks for coming to my talk, even though it's so early in the morning. My name is Pablo, and at the end of the talk, we'll be using the Slido app to put questions. So you can use that on your phone. I'm going to be giving a talk on how I learned 2,000 Chinese characters in 50 days, and you can too, if you're on vacation like I was. Or you're really motivated and have no social life. Or you're just like a normal person and just study for 30 minutes a day, so it takes you more like 6 months. But let's not kid ourselves. You got on a plane and flew here to geek out with our language geeks. You're one of us. You'll probably learn them in even less time than I did. You geeks. So, I was living in Japan, and I noticed that, when I started coming to these events, these conferences, I noticed that many people are afraid of East Asian languages. And most of the time is because of the script. They learn that they have to study thousands of characters, and yeah, that can be really scary. But with this talk, I want to show you that's not as scary as it should be, and I want to motivate more people to learn Japanese, Chinese. And when I was living in Japan, I noticed, and many foreigners living there noticed, that people from other East Asian countries had it much easier. They learned Japanese much faster. So Chinese, Korean students learn Japanese much faster, and that's because they were already used to the characters, to the letters, because a lot of them are shared between Japanese and Chinese. And they're used to the letters even though they don't know how to say them, they don't know how to pronounce them, because they don't know the words, but that gives them a lot of facility to learn the new language. So, and what I'm going to teach you today is a method to really fast get to that point, get to the point of, if you want to learn Chinese, the point at which a Japanese person would start from, which is you have to learn the language, but you're already really used to the characters, so you don't have that wall at the beginning of learning the language. And not only that, but it's really fast. So you don't need to spend the years and years that Japanese and Chinese students in school spend to learn their writing system. This can be done much faster. So, the Chinese characters. I wanted to clarify, for those of you who don't know, that Chinese and Japanese share a common writing system. There's some differences. Some characters are different, but they're based on the same. They're very similar, so the same method can be used for both. So today, the thing that I will be teaching today, it works for learning the Chinese letters, but also the kanji, which are the letters from Chinese origin in Japanese. Japanese has two other writing systems that are simpler. You don't need this method for those, because they can just be learned like any other alphabet for any other language. But these are the hardest ones, so I wanted to focus on this. So the estimate for learning characters using this method is, for Japanese, learning the 2,200 characters that students have to learn in school, it would take you approximately 3 months if you spend 1 hour a day studying, and it would take around 6 to 7 months if you spend 30 minutes a day. And for Chinese, for fluency in reading, many estimates are around 3,000 characters. They should be enough for read almost anything. And that would take you 1 hour, 4 or 5 months if you study for 1 hour a day, or around 10 months if you study for 30 minutes a day. So actually, when I tried this method, I learned 200 characters in my first week, and I was not forgetting them. So I was amazed. It was like magic. I was left with my mouth open, astonished, dumbfounded, like the word for, like the character for mouth, which you can easily figure as an open mouth. So the square represents like an open mouth, right? So it's this kind of easy to remember. And the reason why I like this method so much and why I think it's the best one, it's because it has 4 characteristics that some methods may have 1 or 2 of those, but I haven't found any other method that has all 4 of these. And the first one is that it's fast. You need to spend very little time with each character. So each additional character that you learn, it's very little extra time that you need to spend on it. You don't need to write the same character over and over and over and over like students in Japan and China do. The second one is that it's unambiguous. So a problem that many students have when learning Chinese, Japanese characters is that some of them look very similar. Like the only difference is a little stroke that's in a different position or a little stroke that's missing. And with this method, characters, they will just be completely different concepts in your mind. You're never gonna mix characters that look similar, because in your mind they're just gonna be completely different things, and you'll see why. I'll show you a demonstration. The third one is that it includes writing. You'll know how to write if you want to. You'll know how to write all of the characters that you know, you'll remember. And this one, actually, if you follow this method, it's actually easy to be able to write more characters than even Japanese people do themselves, because they're not used to writing by hand too much. And the fourth one is that it's systematic. So you can use this to learn all the characters that you will ever need, thousands of them, because there are some other methods that they teach you a way, maybe using pictures, and but not all the characters can be learned that way, so they leave you with like 400 or 500 characters, which are not enough to read a book or to read a newspaper. And then you're left with, okay, what do I do now? So with this method, you can learn as many as you will ever need. And yes. So with this method, what you will learn is the meaning. You learn one meaning for each of the characters. You learn to associate that meaning to a character. You'll learn the writing, how to write them, how to write every single stroke the correct same way as people from Japan and China do. And you'll learn recognition. That means that when you're reading, you'll be able to identify each of the characters and know what they mean. What you will not be learning, though, is words. So you'll learn the characters, but you'll still have to do all the same work that you do to learn any other language, which is you'll have to learn the actual words. And you will not learn the pronunciation. Pronunciation, it's trickier. It's a bit easier for Chinese than for Japanese. But I think that trying to do both things at the same time, the characters and also the pronunciation with the phonetics for a language that you're not yet used to, I think it's too much work, and it's not the ideal thing. Because anyways, in the future, you have to learn the words. You have to learn to associate the words with the meaning instantly when you're in conversation. And by learning the reading of the characters, it doesn't help you. So I think it's just a waste of time when, once you already know the word, matching it with the character that you already know is basically zero effort. You don't have to spend any time of it. It's a concept, both are already concepts in your minds, the character and the new word that you've learned in Chinese or Japanese, and just linking them together is free, is very easy, and you basically don't forget. So if you learn this, you'll basically be the same as a Japanese person who's just started to learn Chinese, or a Chinese person who's just started to learn Japanese. And you'll have a strong, solid foundation, strong like a tree. So this is the character for tree. And we can remember this thanks to how the character evolved. So initially it represented a drawing of the roots and the branches of a tree. So in between you can see that the upper lines are the branches and the lower lines are the roots. And with evolution, the branches kind of went a bit up, and they joined the roots, they went a bit up and they joined the branches, so now the roots are coming from the top, which is a bit strange, but you can imagine the top line to be the branches and the lines going down being the roots. And we'll find this character over and over, so don't worry, we'll in the end we'll remember it very well. So if you haven't noticed yet, what we're doing to remember the characters are mnemonics. And yeah, this is what we're doing. And this method is based on, well, it's not based, it's the method that Isaac invented. So it comes from these books, and these are amazing. You don't need to buy them. I'll be teaching you how to use this method without really spending any money, but getting them is still good. I recommend it if you can. And there is books, I recommend books 1 and 3 for Japanese, because book 2 is for the readings, for how to pronounce the letters. And it's just, I don't think it's worth it. For Chinese, there's more simplified for mainland China and traditional for Hong Kong and Taiwan. And with books 1 and 2, you can get up to 3,000 characters. So both for Japanese and for Chinese, you can get up to around 3,000 characters. Yes, so I'll give you an example. The character for goods, it uses the character for mouth that we learned before. So you can see that this is the character for mouth 3 times. So the way we can remember that this character means goods is with a story like this. When we think of goods in modern industrial society, we think of what's been mass-produced. That is to say, produced for the masses of open mouths, waiting like baby birds in a nest to consume whatever comes their way. So we can imagine it as 3 mouths of 3 consumers, which are waiting for the products, for the goods that industrial society is providing them. So you can imagine like 3 little birds, 3 consumers waiting for the products. And for this method, it's very important to use your imagination. So to actually imagine the story happening, you're not using visual memory. There's no photographic memory involved here. It's just conceptual memory. It's just imagination. Another example is, this example uses the 2 characters that we learned before. So we can see that the same parts are being used over and over. So here we have the character for mouth and the character for tree, which means dumbfounded, so like astonished, right? So a way how we can remember this character is, worst night of my life. I woke up with a bad hangover on top of a tree. How did I get here? I opened my mouth in astonishment, dumbfounded. So you can imagine that I got really drunk and I woke up in the morning at the top of a tree with my mouth open. What am I doing here? And I was dumbfounded just because of the situation. So it's an easy way to remember this character. So we're using stories. Yeah, we're using stories. The books, if you follow the books, they introduce the meaning of each of the parts of the characters, and then it teaches you many characters that use those parts. So for example, we learn the character for mouth, and then the book goes on showing many characters that use that part for mouth. That means that you keep reviewing the meanings of those parts. You review them many times when you first learn them, so that helps really ingrain them in your memory, and you remember them very well. And also, the character for dumbfounded is not very common, but it's very simple. It uses parts that you have already learned. And not only that, but this character also appears as part of other characters that are way more common than this one. So it's worth learning this one before, because you'll use it for other common characters, and because the little effort involved in learning one additional character is just so little. And you learn them so fast that it's actually better to learn the easier to learn ones first and not worry about which ones are used more frequently or less frequently, because you learn a lot of them in a very short time anyway. And yes, I also want to show how these stories help you distinguish very similar looking characters. So for that, we'll be learning the character for large. So the way we'll remember large will be with a story like this. Shows a person with open arms, so you can imagine. Okay. So you can imagine the two legs of a person and has their arms open like this. So shows a person with open arms, showing how much she needs to open her arms to hug a large, fat sumo wrestler. So a person like this, and shows, yeah, the sumo wrestler is like this big. I need to open my arms like this. And this character is used as a part for the character dog. So the way we'll remember the character dog is represents the sumo wrestler with his arms open, and the drop that's added as a fourth and final stroke up here represents the stick that the man is ready to throw to his dog. So the way we imagine this is a big sumo wrestler with a stick, and he's going to throw the stick to his dog. So this is the character for dog. And a similar looking character will be plump. So here we can see again the sumo wrestler with a small thing at the bottom. And the way we're going to remember this, I've tried it before and people were thinking strange things. It's still kind of strange, but maybe not as strange as you guys will think. So there's really plump sumo wrestler. This one is extra fat. The drop at the bottom represents the sweat. So he's so fat that he can't help sweating all the time. So you can imagine a big, fat, like really fat sumo wrestler, and he's so fat that he's all red and sweating, and the thing at the bottom is the drop of sweat. And so if you get the book, I recommend you just start reading through it. You don't need it though. If you search for remembering the kanji introduction, or remembering the Hanzi, I'll say it in English because I don't know how to speak Chinese. Remembering the Hanzi introduction, you can find it for free online and start reading through the book. If you don't use DuckDuckGo and want to use a regular search engine, that's fine. Okay. And when you go through the book, you'll see that there's stories. The book gives you already stories for the first 500 characters, but after that, it leaves you to make up your own stories. And the author of the book recommends that you do that because it will help. You'll get stories that are better for you because you can find stories that are interesting or weird, or like obscene stories also work really well. You're not going to show them to anybody, so you're free to come up with really, really weird stories. Remembering the Hanzi, like Hanzi. Yes, in Chinese, you'll say it like that. And yeah, so the book only has 500 stories. And I agree with the fact that some of the stories are a bit generic, but it's so much work to try to come up with so many, like 2,500 stories. So a great resource to use is kanji.kohi.com. People come here to share their own stories, so you can browse through a bunch of different stories and pick the one that you like best. And this is amazing. This saves so much time. And you can come to the website, and you can, on the top left box, you can put the number of the character that's on the book. Or you can, if you're starting from the beginning, you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it shows the character, it shows the meaning, and down here you can see shared stories, and you see all the stories that everybody has shared, and you pick the best one, the one that you think you're gonna remember best. Sometimes the primitives, the parts, people find additional meanings for them, more interesting meanings. So for example, the primitive for thread like the thing that clothes are made of. Some people thought, okay, instead of thread, I'm gonna say this is Spider-Man, and they have Spider-Man in their stories, which makes for more memorable stories. So I'll give an example of how we can use this website to learn a new character. So let's say that we come to the character for utensil. So as you can see, it's made of 2 different parts. The part for mouth that we learned before, and the part for beak. So it's basically 4 mouths around a big sumo wrestler. So the way how we'll remember this is the hungry mouths of 4 cannibals sit around the large man, stuffed and garnished, legs apart. At least they have civility to use utensils. So we can imagine a big sumo wrestler on a table, and there's 4 cannibals around it with their mouths open, ready to eat it. But they're using a fork and a spoon. Nice. So this is the meaning for utensil. So we connect all the different parts of the characters through a story, and at the end we have the meaning of the character itself, the utensils that the 4 cannibals are using to eat. And yeah, so the book, this website, kanji.kohi.com, it uses the keywords and the character numbers for the Japanese version of the book. If you're learning Chinese, you can go to this URL, and this is a link to a forum post where a guy describes how you can use the website for Chinese. It's not difficult. It just involves finding a list of words, the list of words of the Chinese book, and there you get the numbers that you can then go and put in the website. Okay. And so yeah, you just do this. Every day you can learn an X amount of new characters. I know, between 10 and 50, depending how much available time you have. I think 25 is a good amount if you have some time every afternoon or every evening to study. So now we know how to learn new characters, but how do we make sure we don't forget them? And Anki. And for the 2 people here who don't know what Anki is, it's a flashcard application, and it's spaced repetition. So flashcard means that you have a question and an answer. So you see the question first, and then you test yourself and see if you remember the answer or not. And then you answer if you remember, if you didn't remember it, or you barely remember it, or you remember it well or very well. And what it does is space repetition. That means that it tries to optimize the time at which you are asked to review the card, so you don't spend a lot of time studying things that you already know well. It will schedule the card, and you'll see again tomorrow, and then in 3 days, and then in a week, and then in a month. So this helps you not spend more time reviewing than you need to. And so you do this. The way you review them is you go from keyword to character. You have the keyword in the front, so you see the word dog, and your job is to remember the character. If you're interested in being able to write Chinese or Japanese, I recommend that you have a sheet of paper and you actually write it down. The Android application, it has a whiteboard functionality, so you can actually write with your finger. If you just want to be able to read the characters and identify them, you can draw it in your mind, it's no problem. As long as you remember the story and remember the different parts of the character and where they were, that's enough. So you'll see the word dog here, and your job is to remember the character. I recommend also having the story in the answer. You don't need to read it every time if you got it right, but if you got it wrong, you have it there, you can read it again. And yeah, at the bottom, you cannot see here, but you have like 4 buttons. I didn't remember it, I remember it, barely remember it well, remember it very well. And this is for Anki. The website, kanji.kahi.com, it also has a space repetition functionality, so you can actually just use that website for almost everything. I still recommend reading the introduction of the book though, because it gives additional information and it shows how to write the strokes, in which direction, and the order of the strokes.
You don't make flashcards that go the other way now?
No, I found, the author of the book found that it's not necessary, and I found the same. We don't know why it works, but studying it this way is enough for being able to recognize the character when you find it in text. We don't know why, but yeah, when you see a character, you can remember the story already because you see the parts there, and you can remember the meaning, so it's not necessary to study it in any other way. And yeah, so I did this, and I'm gonna show you what it was like for me when I was learning. I started this in 2010, and Anki has this statistics functionality, which is really cool. You can see any of the bars are 1 week, so I spent around 7 weeks of like hardcore. These are, by the way, these are new cards that I started studying. So this is like how many new cards I added to my Anki deck every week. So you can see the maximum is 350. So for a week, every day consistently, I was adding 50 new characters. I was studying 50 new characters. I was on vacation, so if you have a job and stuff, then it's gonna be lower, but it still should be like way under one year in total. And you can see the blue line here. It shows the total amount of cards that I added. So after 7 weeks, I was at 2,000. So it took me around 50 days to reach 2,000 characters. And then I took it easy, because I was going to Japan after 6 months, and way before I went to Japan, I had already got up to like more than 3,000 characters. And after that, I kept adding a little bit every time I found some characters when reading or something. But there's not many new ones that you're gonna find if you already got up to 3,000 characters. These are for new cards that I started studying, and these are for reviews. So how much time I spend reviewing every day. So at the top, I was spending this 22 or 23 hours per week, which is a bit more than 3 hours per day. So yeah, most people are not going to be able to do that unless they're just focusing on only doing that. And I don't recommend it because you also can get a bit like too tired and stop doing it, which is not good, right? But soon after I stopped adding so many new cards, it went down more to, how much is this? More to just like 40 minutes or a bit less every day. And after some time, it went down more like 15 minutes, and it continued going down after some months and years after that. And I found, eventually I stopped reviewing them because I realized that I didn't need to be able to write anything else than my own address, even when I was living in Japan. If you want to continue to be able to write them, I recommend just continue studying. If in your life you got some writing practice, just because you like to write or send letters or whatever way you want to continue practicing, then you may be able to just stop doing the reviews even. But what I found is that even if I stop doing the reviews, I can still read. I don't forget to read, I keep reading, and it's something that's forgotten way later than like to write them. To write them is more tricky, and I think you don't need to write the same character many times, but you need to write it every once in a while if you don't want to forget how to write it. But you'll still be able to identify them. So I read Japanese, I'm better at reading Japanese than I was even when I was doing this, just because more exposure and more reading practice. Okay. And yes, so I recommend doing this and not learning how to read the characters, because you're gonna have to spend time learning the words anyway. So the two-step program for learning Japanese or Chinese is step 1, learn the kanji or hanzi this way. Step 2, proceed as usual. Just learn the language the same way you like to learn any other language. Yeah, I've found that the system works way better than anything else. I haven't found any other person who's able to just go around in Japan and read basically everything and read basically every text and has not used this, unless they've spent like 20 years or so with it. But there are some pains in using the book that I found, and I want to help you. If you do this, I want to help you with these like small pains. And to do that, first, I'm going to teach you the character for person, so we'll use it as an example. So this, you can imagine a person that's like walking like this, so with the 2 legs, and maybe the person has its hands in their pockets or something. And the character for person, it will appear also as a part of other characters, but having a person in your stories is not very easy to remember, because many stories will have people. So it's better to find a meaning that's more specific. So instead of being a person, it's gonna be the person, Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris does something very special, because when he's with other things, he tends to do a round kick like this. So you can imagine this as being Chuck Norris doing his round kick. And yeah, so when we get this part will be on the left side of the character most of the time, and we'll have Chuck Norris in our story. So my first pain point was ambiguous keywords. Ambiguous keywords means that you're going through the book and you find the word for the character for rest, but you may not be sure if it means to rest as in to take a break, or the rest as the remaining. So, and if you don't have a story to clarify that, you may be confused and end up making a completely wrong story. So what I recommend for that is using a dictionary. There's Rikain-kun for Chrome if you're doing Japanese. There's other extensions for Chinese and for other browsers that are very similar. So it's just, they're called pop-up dictionary. And if you go to the website that I showed before, you just hover, you just put your mouse, your cursor over the character, and it will show you this pop-up. So here you can see that the character means rest, day off, retire, sleep. So you can be pretty sure that means to take some time off to rest, right? Yeah, so the way we then will remember this character is Chuck Norris never gets tired. He therefore never leans against trees to rest. Rather, trees lean against Chuck Norris to rest when they're tired of standing up all the time. So you can imagine trees get tired and there's like, oh, there's a Chuck Norris here, let's lean against him to rest. My second pain point was mixing up keywords. So for example, I'll give you another example, we'll learn a new character. This is the character for to protect. So we can see on the right side the character for dumbfounded that we learned before, the guy with a hangover who woke up at the top of a tree, and then we have Chuck Norris. So the way we can associate this character to the word protect is Chuck Norris saw me when I was dumbfounded and hungover at the top of a tree. He told me to jump and he protected my fall with his strong and ripped arms. So I was at the top of a tree and I saw Chuck Norris and he told me, come, jump, I'll protect you with my arms. And he protected my fall. So that way we associate the character to the word protect. And we'll be going through the book, but then we'll find characters that have similar meanings, keywords that have similar sounds, similar meanings, I mean. And we'll find guard and defense. And when reading, this will not be a problem, because we'll see the character, we'll remember the story, and we know what it means. It doesn't matter if we remember the exact keyword, but rather its general meaning is good enough. The problem is when we're reviewing on Anki, we see the keyword. It's kind of easy to jump from the keyword to the wrong story. So I'll show you how to avoid that. So what we can do is to add extra information to the question part of the Anki card. And instead of protect, for example, we can say to protect somebody. So that matches our story with Chuck Norris, in which he protects us, so he's protecting somebody. Instead of to guard, we can say a guard, like the person who works as a guard, security guard or something. And instead of to defend, we can say that's gonna be to defend a country, and we make a story that matches that meaning. And then when we encounter the character, we'll still know that it means to defend. We just know that the way we're learning it is to defend a country, just to clarify. But in the question part of Anki, we can also make sure that we highlight defend to remember that that's the actual meaning. And so your to-do list, if you want to implement this method, is go read the book, either buy the book or get the introduction online. And then learn the characters using the book, or use kanji.kohi.com, make a flashcard deck in Anki, or use the same website. On your first day, you can just start learning your first 20 stories and adding them to your Anki or adding them to on the website. And then you can set up 30 minutes each day, so you can make sure you do reviews. Do not forget the ones you know already, and learn some more stories. So if you know you have a limited amount of time every day, you don't need to always learn the same amount of new characters. You can just set up 30 minutes, do all the reviews that you have for that day, and only if you have time left, then you can add new cards. So if you only have time for 5 new cards, that's fine. Only for 10 new cards, that's fine. And that way you'll make sure that you don't overwhelm yourself and you don't end up having to do like 3 hours of reviews one day. And once you're done with that, you'll get to the end of the book, then go learn Japanese or Chinese like you learn any other language. And finally, I want to see if this method actually works. So we're gonna be having a little test. I'm not gonna ask you, so you're gonna self-evaluate. Nobody's gonna be putting you on the spot, but we're gonna see if it actually works. And so, first question, which one is dog? I just want, don't answer, just raise your hand if you're pretty confident, more than 50% confident that you know, okay, pretty good. Second question, oh yeah, so it was this one, the fat sumo wrestler who's gonna throw his stick, right? What does this mean? First thing, if you remember the story and if you're pretty confident that you know the meaning of the character, whoa, pretty good. And finally, yeah, it was utensil, so it was the 4 cannibals going to eat the fat man with their utensils. And finally, what's the character for protect? So first thing, if you remember the story, I know maybe you cannot write the parts, but just if you remember which parts were there, please raise your hand. Whoa, amazing, cool. Yeah, so it was like this. We have the dumbfounded hangover guy and Chuck Norris protecting his fall. And yeah, finally we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man was busy saving people, but then winter arrived and his strings became brittle and he fell down, and it was the end. So I'm Pablo Román, and I know it has no relationship whatsoever, but I'm making Spanish videos for Spanish learners, so you can go there if you also want to learn Spanish. Thank you.
We'll go to some questions from Slido now. The first one is, this sounds like a good system to learn to recognize the characters, but what about stroke order?
The book teaches stroke order. I think it's the main reason why I would recommend using the book, even if you can find it online through some other means. I think it's the best reason to use the book rather than only the website. There is dictionaries and things that you can find that will animate the stroke order. I recommend doing that. I think stroke order is not very important for reading, but it has many benefits that I think it's good. It's not too difficult. You get used to it, and the same stroke order is kept. So when you know the stroke order of one of the components, then it's gonna be maintained almost always. In other characters, it's not hard to remember. It has benefits to help you understand handwritten letters, because handwritten letters sometimes are kind of slurred, they're written with a single stroke. And if you have that practice of writing, you can usually identify them just by imagining yourself following that line. Sometimes kind of clicks what character it's written there. Yeah, so I think there are benefits. They're not like super important if your only motivation to learn the characters is to read. It's not that important, but it's still good to do it. I did it, and I think it benefited me in a few ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Next one is, what about pronunciation? So at what point do you incorporate learning the pronunciation?
What I did and what I recommend is you learn the characters, and then you'll still have to learn the language. And matching those words to the characters is very easy. So for example, I started learning Chinese. After I'm pretty confident with my Japanese, I started learning Chinese, I started watching YouTube videos, and Taiwanese TV all the time has subtitles. Well, if it's a word that I had learned in Chinese, the matching with the letters was instant. Like, I saw it once or twice, and then I can remember it. When I see it written, I remember, oh, this is that word. It's almost zero effort. But if you're trying to remember the pronunciation for a character, but you don't know which word this is going to appear in, I think it's going to be very hard to remember. It's a lot of effort. It's more work, more than twice as much work as just remember the character by itself. Especially if you're trying to learn syllables of a language you're not familiar with. It's hard. Once you get familiar with the language, then it's very easy to remember a new word in the language. But it's just, if it's a new language, it's a combination of sounds that you're not used to, sounds that may sound very similar to you. I think it's the ideal way of doing it.
So then, do you recommend starting with the Hanzi before you've really started studying the language?
This is about like compromises, I think. I happen to know hiragana and katakana because I like alphabets and I knew them before I started learning Japanese. And then I started with kanji right at the same time as I started getting immersion in Japanese. I don't know if there's like strong reasons to delay learning kanji. Yeah, I cannot think of a strong, like very strong reason to delay learning kanji. But learning them right at the beginning is beneficial because you can start putting your phone in Japanese or Chinese and your computer and start getting practice recognizing the characters. And if you're living in Japan or China, it's incredible because you get to understand what's written around and you'll be the coolest foreigner. Yeah, so probably I think there are strong benefits in learning them right at the beginning, also because it doesn't take a long time. And alongside, you can still be learning grammar if you are into that kind of thing, or getting input as I was doing.
So I've tried to use this method, but struggled making the characters stick in my mind. Do you have any thoughts about why that might be?
Not really. I've read a bit the forums, and there were comments about people who didn't like it. So main reason for people to not using this that I found until now is I don't like it. I feel silly remembering stories, or just I prefer to also learn how to pronounce them at the same time because I want to, not because I have like an actual reason of, oh, I think this should be better, but rather because of personal preference. I don't know if you want to say why you think that you are not remembering them. I haven't found that case, but yeah, if you want to explain more, I don't know who put the question, but maybe if you give me more details, I can try to guess why that may have been the case.
Did you make your Anki cards for the characters like right after you learned them on the same day?
Yes, so I would sit down every day and I had a goal of a number of characters that I wanted to learn, and it was most of the time between 25 and 50 until I got to 2000, and then more like 15 or 10 when getting from 2000 to 3000. And yeah, I'll sit down and instantly I'll come up with a story, I'll choose a story on the website, and I would add it to my Anki deck. I didn't mention that before, but I should say there's Anki decks that are already made. You can download those and then you'll spend less time copying and pasting the character and then writing the story, or copying and pasting the story. But I guess the stories you still want to choose the one that you like most, so you'll need to still spend some time copying and pasting onto Anki. But you have your deck that's already made, the characters there in order. You can go to Anki and look at the share decks, and there's versions for Japanese, for Chinese. That's only the first book or all the books, so that may save you some time if you want to do that. But yeah, I don't think there's a reason for learning the character first and then adding it to Anki sometime later. I'll just do it immediately.
How do you check how many characters you already know?
So I'm guessing that means that you've learned characters for a while and you don't know if you should. Well, I don't know the number. I don't know why you want to know the number of how many you know if you start learning with a different method before. But I can guess that you may not want to learn again the ones that you already know, maybe. If you're really confident that you'll be able to write that character and not forget it, you may skip it when adding it to your Anki deck. Even if you know the character and you can identify it, but you're not sure that you'll be able to write it every time or not confuse it with similar looking characters, I would just add it to Anki and make up a story, because it's just so little effort, it's so little time that you need to spend for any additional character that I would just add it and study it anyway. I'm not sure if that's the question or the reason why you wanted to know how many characters you already know. Once you start using this method, you know how many you already know, because you just check the number of cards that you have. And usually when people start doing reviews, their success rate of answering is like between 90 and 95. So if you want to be picky, then you can say, okay, maybe I'll remember 90, 95 of this, 95% of these cards.
If I want to live in Taiwan, should I learn the traditional characters right away or start with simplified?
Traditional. It's easier to identify. I think it's easier to identify simplified from traditional than traditional from simplified, probably. I knew Japanese and something in between. For me, it's not hard to. It doesn't matter that much, really. But if you're gonna be in Taiwan, yeah, why not the traditional? Then you can learn the simplifications. Some of the simplifications, for those of you who don't know, they're very systematic. So it's one part that's always replaced for a similar but simplified part. And then that's very easy to identify the other characters. Some of them are more heavily simplified, and those have to be learned separately. But I would guess like between 100 and 200 that you can learn additional to that, and then you'll be able to identify most of the simplified characters also.
Could you recommend any apps that would allow you to write characters and enforce stroke order?
I have no idea. I haven't used anything like that.
Did you want to recommend it? Japanese? Skritter? Skritter.
And there's also a website that does that, including vocabulary, like combinations of characters and pronunciation, and it's got the factors all in it, called Wanikani.
Wanikani.
For Japanese, but the first 3 levels are free because we've got a number of levels and sorts of radicals, and you learn like 1,700 characters and 5,000 words of vocabulary and how to use it, which kind of readings to use when.
Cool. And so another useful site, Wanikani, right? For the video. Kaniwani, okay. Cool. That is it for our time. So again, thank you very much, Pablo.
Thank you.